Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, folks. I have neglected you over the last few weeks a little, but I did think I'd give you a chance to catch up with the latest episodes before diving straight back in. So obviously I am back in the UK now, but one of our dinosaurs is missing. What am I talking about? I didn't mean a cheesy Disney movie. I meant to say that one of my cases is missing since I got back. Has an airline ever lost your case? Well, it was Lufthansa that lost mine in Frankfurt, and man, what a frustrating experience that's turned out to be. Nobody to talk to, just emails saying, yeah, check this web link out for updates, which I check 10 times a day, and guess what? It doesn't update. So I reached out to the team on Twitter, only to be told, please keep in touch with your responsible lost and found office. I think the social media intern didn't go to empathy school either. It also seemed oblivious to the fact that maybe the airline has a little responsibility here too. But enough of my rants. I won't let it ruin my travels because I love the idea of being like Kane in Kung Fu, if anyone's old enough to remember that. Just walking from town to town, meeting people and getting into adventures. Do you ever feel like that? Because I think travel really does broaden your horizons and enables you to see the world through other people's eyes. And that's one of the reasons that I'm incredibly excited to get today's guest on. He's from a non-profit that's on a mission to transform the developing world through high-growth entrepreneurship. It's called Alter, and it does this by finding the most promising ventures in developing countries and helping them scale. And they accomplish what billions of dollars of aid have largely failed to do over the last few decades. Because they build businesses, leaping over gaps in infrastructure development, and actually create thousands of jobs locally. We're talking about a long-term solution rather than a short-term solution, and with technology right at the heart of it all. Now, I always say that technology works best when it brings people together, and this is a great example of that, and a perfect episode to launch straight after my travels. So buckle up, hold on tight, so I can beam your ears all the way back to the Bay Area, so we can speak with Alter founder and CEO, Jesse Sullivan. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Jesse. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi, Neil. My name is Jesse Sullivan, and I'm the founder and CEO of Alter Global. So before starting Alter, I used to work in international development. And so I was down in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010, doing more traditional aid charity work and also doing counterinsurgency work with the U.S. Department of Defense over in Afghanistan, trying to help bring about a peaceful resolution to that conflict. And what I learned through some of that work was that, good intentions don't always equal good outcomes. And I really wanted to find a way to actually be able to derive good outcomes in the parts of the world that needed them most. And I realized most of our solutions were kind of Band-Aid solutions that weren't really getting at the root cause of the problem, which I saw as a lack of real value creation happening and scalable value creation and job creation. And so I thought to myself, how can we really get that going? And so I went back to school at Stanford Business School and created a venture called Alter. And so at Alter, we're heading back into those same environments, into the developing world, and saying, how can we find those very few most exceptional businesses and business leaders that we can then match with Silicon Valley resources to help them scale their businesses and create good outcomes.
I think travel's such a wonderful thing because it really does alter your perception and your worldview. Now, Alter is a non-profit with a mission of transforming the developing world through that high-growth entrepreneurship that you mentioned a few moments ago. But just to help anyone listening hearing about Alter Global for the very first time, can you just help set the scene a little bit about how you're going to achieve this and also the role that technology plays in that?
Yeah, sure. So our model is to really say, okay, can we find, first of all, those really exceptional management teams that are building something scalable? And so what we do is we go into the country, we do an ecosystem mapping. And it's funny how, Steve Jobs would say, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. It's really hard going forwards. And for me, doing counterinsurgency work in Afghanistan, combining it with Stanford Business School, actually set me up really well to be able to head into these environments that are pretty chaotic and not well mapped, and being able to say, okay, who here are some of those most influential, high character people in the private sector? And what we do is we form a small advisory board of some of the most influential, high character public and private sector officials, and then we really say, like, who here has the greatest potential to create something of value. And we do this relationship-based sourcing, and we narrow it down to these very few companies that we really feel like have great potential. So that's really number one. And, finding those leverage points that we can really work with and believe in. And it's some of these lessons I learned doing international development work before, which I felt like weren't getting at that root cause of the problem. And most times the solutions were, you're trying to bring an external solution to the problem. And I learned a few key lessons that, if you think you're going to create value in these parts of the world quickly, or as an outsider who doesn't understand the local context, then you better think again. It's not going to happen. And so for me, our model, we've said, like, who locally gets it, who understands what's going on, who's built their lives around understanding that context. And then can we work with them, those who are long-term committed to creating value there? And then can we say, what can we do to offer you value and while you're scaling up your business? And so we find only the highest growth tech businesses in the environment there. And so we down select to say, okay, who are the top 2 to 3? And then what we do, rather than, I'm kind of shaped by the whole Silicon Valley perspective of, lean startup methodology and human-centered design. And so rather than us coming in and saying, here's what you need, best-in-class entrepreneur to scale your business, instead we say, how do we help serve you? What are the key bottlenecks that you're facing as a company to really scale it? And what we've come away with are some consistent themes around, hey, we need greater access to capital and investment dollars. We need greater access to expertise and talent and knowledge. And we need greater access to networks and markets for our goods. And so we've really built our services around those core areas. And so we match up impact investors with the companies. We haven't done any direct equity investing ourselves in any of the companies we work with, but that is the plan. That's the long-term sustainability for Alter, is to actually raise a fund to invest in those best-in-class entrepreneurs. But up to this point, we've just been matchmaking between some really great impact investment firms and the companies. And then also on the expertise talent side, I would say that's the core area. When we've really talked to the entrepreneurs to say, what do you need? What are the real bottlenecks you face to scale your venture? They'll say, really it's the talent and the team, and building out my team to be able to execute on this grand mission and vision that we have. So under that bucket, we've developed some recruiting services where we've tried to hire in the right talent, typically like kind of diaspora talent. We might even do some short term, like from Harvard and Stanford business schools. For this summer, we had 25 intern applications to go work with our portfolio companies from those schools. And then we also have a partnership with McKinsey to bring great consulting services. And so Gary Pincus, the head of McKinsey North America, is on our advisory board. And so working with this best-in-class consulting services to say, like, how do we help you overcome some of the knowledge gaps you might have in your business? And so what we feel like we can do is really the global benchmarking. Rather than us, I used to think, we can provide some local solutions to what they're working on. But what I found is these entrepreneurs, they are like the expert in the entire country on what they're working on. Say, for instance, in Myanmar, we're working with Win-Win Tent, who is the largest retailer in the country of Myanmar. You're not going to tell Win-Win anything about the country of Myanmar and doing retail there that she doesn't already know. She's the expert on it. But where we've been able to add value to her is to say, okay, well, let's match you up with the head of e-commerce at Walmart and their grocery delivery services to help you build out, a roadmap and a plan for your own e-commerce services in Myanmar, because she doesn't have access to that locally. Or, she said, while I'm benefiting from all of the growth of our company, I'd really like my employees to do the same. But we have no model for that. And so we matched her up with the National Center for Employee Ownership that helped her to create a model, kind of the first model ever in Myanmar of an employee ownership model that now other companies can kind of try to replicate from her. And so the last one is really on the networks and market side. And so to give an example of that, we've got an entrepreneur down in Haiti, Eve Carr, who's just awesome. All of our entrepreneurs are so incredible. They could be anywhere doing anything, but typically they've gone international. They've gone to high school in their local country. They've gone internationally to study at some of the best schools or to work at some amazing companies. And they've said, hey, this is my home country. I want to create value here. And so they head back and get a business going. And so Eve Carr down in Haiti, she said, what I really need is access to markets. I want to sell into the United States. And so what we did was we matched her up with Whole Foods, where she's now selling. She does a beauty products company. And so she's been able to create close to 300 jobs down in Haiti of farmers out in their fields producing the inputs and manufacturing these beauty supplies. And we helped to match her up with Whole Foods to get her in, and also into Sephora has an awesome program, Sephora Stands, that works with female entrepreneurs. And so she's been working with Sephora as well. And that's really on the network side. You know, if I really look at any amazing companies that are supporting really good entrepreneurs, like Y Combinator, for instance, I think, you know, there's a lot of knowledge you can provide and value. But, you know, I can go on to how to start a startup right now and listen to all the awesome things. But what they really offer to the entrepreneurs are, one, a signaling mechanism where everyone's able to say, oh, okay, these really are best in class entrepreneurs. You know, like I don't have to go out and source and select. They kind of indicate to people, hey, we're really best in class. So that signaling mechanism. The other thing they provide is a network. And it's a group of people who can help you get what you want when you need it. And I know that you've in the past interviewed GLG, yeah. I saw. And so we really view ourselves in a similar way with our entrepreneurs to say, how do we help you rather than bringing you through, you know, a type of cohort process or more of a framework of here's what you need as an entrepreneur or training. We say, no, you tell us what you need and we'll try to help you get it when you need it. Through our network of relationships and expertise built up in Silicon Valley. And so, yeah, so that's really what we do. It's a whole suite of services, but it's all geared towards the entrepreneur saying, here's what bottleneck I'm facing. How can you help me overcome it?
Now, you also mentioned investments there, because I think I'm right in saying that Alter Global's also received millions of dollars in donations from people like the Pineapple Fund and the Ripple founder, the cryptocurrency there, to support developing world entrepreneurship. I mean, did that funding take you by surprise, or was it something that you'd been working hard to achieve behind the scenes for some time?
Yeah, you know, it's actually a combination of both. When it comes to Chris Larson, who's the founder of Ripple, he's an unbelievably great person. And so he is a Stanford Business School alum who I was connected with while I was going through Stanford Business School. So when I first graduated there and I was getting Alter going, we met up, we got to discuss, you know, like what I was trying to work towards. And he had similar notions, like how do you really help the developing world and bring the right talent and solutions to those best entrepreneurs. And so he was really bought into the idea. He made a small donation at the beginning to get us going. So from the very beginning, he was a part of it. And then, you know, that was about 3 years ago, and Ripple has really continued to grow. And so he made a donation to us recently. We raised what we call our Series A round of donor funding. And he was a part of that, and you know, just really generous, but also that money grew quite a bit since he made that donation because of Ripple's success. And so, so that one was more of like a cultivated relationship and friendship that's really grown, where it's really what got me interested in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, and something I'm really delving into a lot deeper now. But the Pineapple Fund was completely by surprise. And Pine, who is still remains anonymous, I basically, you know, heard about it, and I applied actually on on a flight when I was heading home from San Francisco out to visit my family in Illinois. And before I hopped on the flight, I filled out a small form and sent it along. And he got back to me, a week later, and it was right before Christmas. And so it was almost midnight, and said, "Hey, we've got $1 million donation I'd like to give you, and in Bitcoin." And just such a great surprise on that one. And it's really led me to be thinking a lot about, Alter's relationship with blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies, and what we're trying to do. And, it was actually Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, who has been talking a lot about charity and donations in the crypto space, and a lot of generous people, a lot of this wealth that's been generated, folks saying, like, how do we do good in the world through this wealth that's being generated? And I do think that Alter is a great fit for that, because what he was saying is we don't want to just make donations to traditional charities that are immediately going to cash out all of it into fiat currency right away. We want people who are actually going to take advantages of this growth that's happening in crypto. And so we've been thinking a lot about, like, what does that mean for Alter and the way we're supporting our entrepreneurs? And even as we're raising an investment fund, how might we think about, doing a similar to the Arrington $100 million XRP fund, where they're making their investments in XRP into companies? Maybe Alter could be that very first impact investment fund that is actually raised in crypto from generous people around the world looking to do good with their crypto dollars. And then we can make investments in some of these best companies creating value in the parts of the world that need it most in crypto. So, and then any returns going back into the nonprofit that can continue to support these types of entrepreneurs.
I can't tell you how great it is to hear that, because in certain elements of the media, if people listening tune in, they could have the wrong impression about cryptos and think it's all about crime, being anonymous, or greedy kids just chasing after getting their own lambo. But I mean, with the investment of Ripple founder Chris Larsen, they talked about Coinbase and getting funding through Bitcoin as well. Do you think that it's actually a great example of how cryptocurrency completely redefined the social investment area?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's always so much focus on the regulation side, and you think, like, man, there can be stories out there of people who are borrowing money on their credit cards to make these short-term crypto investments to get rich and all of that, and the downsides of this whole space. And my experience in the crypto world has been totally different from that. And while those things do exist, there's this whole side to it that I've been exposed to, which, when you look at the wealth being generated through cryptocurrencies, it really is, it's solving a need out there that's generating value. And I think we're still in the beginning stages of the total amount of value that's going to be created out of this space. But you look at the people, especially who are heading up the space itself, and those aren't the ones who are trying to get rich quick. They're really creating this enormous amount of value through a new technology, and then saying, like, well, how do we continue to create value out of that, not only through blockchain itself, but in this charity donation world, and how can we do it in a new way? And you're naturally getting people who think outside the box and they're not just going to settle for old solutions and say it's good enough. And in the same way, kind of, I talked about my own story of saying, most charity, unfortunately, is not getting at the root cause of the problem, which is real value creation happening and helping spur along that process. I think new crypto founders are the ones who are going to be most aligned with that notion of how do we really just transform this system, not only in blockchain, but in charity overall.
Absolutely. And another thing that we don't talk about often enough, of course, especially in the West, because everyone just assumes everybody's got a bank account. But there's the world's unbanked out there that have been locked down and by oppressive regimes, etc. They'll also be liberated by the cryptos too, won't they?
Oh, it's so true. One of the things that we've learned about developing world technology entrepreneurship is you can't just find great founders out there who are working in a really challenging context and expect the venture to grow. You actually have to have certain enabling conditions on the ground that are right. And a few of those enabling conditions are actually on the technology entrepreneurship side. It is being able to have good access to infrastructure, and telecoms and the kind of competition that brings cheaper access to data. But really the fintech side is also really important. You have to have financial payments infrastructure present on the ground as well in order to get e-commerce going. And you hear a lot about leapfrogging technologies, and the developing world that doesn't have a lot of these legacy infrastructures in place, bank accounts included, being one of those big ones where there's so many unbanked people, but access to credit, and being able to really access the financial system is such a huge area that really unlocks this great amount of value. And I really think that blockchain technology has the capacity to help bring people online for the first time with their finances. And then what that unlocks in the overall tech ecosystem is unreal too, because then that's kind of the underlying necessary infrastructure. And then from there, you can do all sorts of things like, give people access to solar energy, off-grid, solar energy systems, and healthcare access over their phones. We're looking into companies in Bangladesh right now that are, how when there's no health infrastructure around the country, can you really access people and be able to give them, rather than building clinics all over the country, being able to have smartphones and cheap access to data, where now if you can also have a financial payment structure that goes along with that, you can access a good doctor and more quality healthcare that people have never been able to have before. And yeah, so I do think that blockchain technology beyond, there's the finance side and then beyond that in the developing world, it's going to allow people to leapfrog in ways that we haven't even thought of yet.
Now, currently Alter Global is in 4 countries, and you're also working with 17 different ventures. But can you expand on that a little and how you're really making a difference in these areas?
Yeah, sure. So currently 4 countries, 17 ventures. We've been at it for about 2.5 years now, and learning a lot of really good lessons along the way. But so far, our ventures have grown, over $100 million in revenue since we started working with them. But more importantly, they've been able to create over 1,200 jobs since we started working with them. And jobs in these countries are so hard to come by, and unemployment rates are just so high. And whenever you got a single job, you're really talking about at least 10 or more people being provided for through that income. And for me, jobs are like one of the core things. When I was working down in Haiti, in the tent city down there, so it's 55,000 people that had kind of rushed onto the country's only golf course. And my job was to help figure out, how do we really get these people out of this tent city and into good lives again? Every solution was short-term, without it actually being a job that could provide mothers and fathers with consistent income in their pockets so they could provide for their family's basic needs. And so I looked around and said, well, where are the jobs? Where's the opportunity for job creation? And those are just so rare and hard to come by. So working with these best-in-class ventures that are really scalable, that can create those types of jobs, is just huge. And so the other side that we look at is the direct services and products provided by the companies that we're working with. And so far we've had millions of people being served by the products and services of those 17 ventures. So I'll just give you a few examples. One is a mesh Wi-Fi company in Myanmar that really, 2 PhDs from MIT that are Burmese, that worked at Intel for 7 years and could be anywhere doing anything, but they went back to Myanmar to build this business. And since we started working with them alone in the last year, they have brought 100,000 new people online with this cheap, reliable access to data. And so it's 100,000 businesses and people that are now online as a result. And what that means in Yangon, in a city like Yangon, but also in a country like Myanmar, is it allows for all these other services to take place, where another company we're working with is called Impact Terra. And they're an ag tech venture in Myanmar. And so they're helping farmers who are out in their fields just living off of kind of this really basic low amount of income. They're getting them the data that they need out in their fields in a really easy to use interface where they can say, okay, how do we help a farmer to double the income they're getting out of their small plot of land by connecting them with the right market prices, the right suppliers, fertilizers and seeds, and also the right buyers when the time is right, along with weather data and all this other stuff that now their smartphones can provide. And when they have cheaper access to that data and their smartphones, then they can double the amount of income that they're getting out of this small plot of land. Well, they've been able to bring online 2 million people into this ag tech business so far. And so, another one to mention might be Cocoa Tech, that is trying to do the same with healthcare and giving people access to doctors and maternal health nutrition that they otherwise wouldn't get access to. And so when we're measuring our impact that we can actually make, we're looking at the number of jobs we can create, the number of services that those companies can provide to those who need them, but also this third category. And this is the one that really inspires me the most and that I think can really have the most long-term impact. Our theory of change is that any ecosystem develops from a few success stories. If you look at Silicon Valley and the development of that ecosystem, which began in microchips, and now if you look at the PayPal mafia, but success begets success. And you really need a few incredible success stories that now can be an inspiration. They can be mentors. They can start new ventures. They can invest in a whole new generation of ventures that can create value. And so what we're doing is we're really finding those amazing people who can be ecosystem role models that are high character, that say, I'm not just building a company here, I'm building the country. And over time, when they have success in their own ventures, they're the type that have this give back mentality that can inspire others, but also give back and really get the tech ecosystems in their countries going. So I think we're really yet to see the amount of deeper level impact that can take place through the work we're trying to do at Alter.
So when you're faced with so much devastation and you see a lot of suffering there, where do you begin on projects like that on such a huge scale to deliver that long-term solution? I mean, what's Alter's approach to that?
Yeah, it can really be overwhelming.
Yeah.
I've been at this now myself in international development type of work for about 12, 13 years. And for me, the one key mantra that always runs through my head is that good intentions do not equal good outcomes. And I've seen a lot of compassion and a lot of incredible people who, myself included for so many years in the role of traditional charity, working with government, working with, the military to say, how do we bring a good outcomes in these countries that are well-intentioned, but they don't really get at root causes. And so I think, being very, very strategic in saying, what are we going to accomplish here and how are we actually going to get there in a very strategic way? And rather than just looking at all of those needs, it's really narrowing it down to say, like, what assets do we have to bring here and what problems should we be most focused on? And so we try to make it simple and we say, all right, out of this entire country, who are the 1 to 3 teams that are just exceptional people who are building something that can be truly scalable? And then we have this amazing network of people in Silicon Valley that we're continually developing even more relationships and building out that network of support, which I'm so amazed by too. Just to mention, a lot of Silicon Valley gets a bad rap for a lot of different reasons, but I just feel like the people that I've met there that are creating all of this value in the world, we have in our interactions with them, whenever we say, hey, we've identified people in the developing world that are the greatest leverage points to do good there. You've developed a unique skill set or resources to help in this way. Would you be willing to be a part of that? We get an overwhelming response of people who are eager to try to join hands to make that happen. It's not people who are just looking out for their own self-interest or, to become wealthy themselves. It's a kind of an extension of that crypto analogy we were talking about before. It's not all Lambos and, going to the moon. It's like, well, how do I create something of value here for people who need it? And so what we do is we say, okay, just to keep the analogy really, really simple, we find some of the best people in Silicon Valley who have real skills to offer, real knowledge to offer, and resources to offer. And then we go out into the developing world. We choose a few key countries that we really feel are in need, but where there's also real opportunity for growth. And then we say, can we identify those very few best teams there? And then we say, what do you need? How can we help you to scale your venture? And now we're just a bridge. We're like a two-way bridge between Silicon Valley and these key teams in the developing world. And I think when we really focus on that and we be very strategic in the way that we're offering that value, being that bridge and that link between the two, it just seems so simple. Like the execution of it can be challenging sometimes, but whenever we really simplify the strategy down to that, it becomes a lot easier to get the good outcomes we're looking for.
It's so true what you said there a few moments ago as well about Silicon Valley getting a bad rap, but it's often quite the opposite, because I did speak with John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple, a few weeks ago, and he was reflecting on when he was listening to a conversation with Steve Jobs, Wozniak and Bill Gates, and they were all talking about having a noble cause and putting a bit of social good back into the world, and he had adopted that too, and he was trying to improve healthcare. There is a proper ethos of wanting to make a difference in the tech industry, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost reached the level of such a truism that on the show Silicon Valley, it's like, hey, we're going to change the world. Like everyone has that notion that they're going to change the world, because it is honestly true. Like so many people are not just doing it for wealth, creation for themselves. It's really, as Steve Jobs would say, to put a dent in the universe. And even at Stanford Business School, at the heart, of Silicon Valley, where I got to, attend and get to feel and experience. What drew me there, along with a lot of my classmates, was this, their slogan is change lives, change organizations, change the world. And it's not just empty rhetoric, but it really is an authentic pursuit. And I found so many others that, and we experience it every day when we reach out to friends in Silicon Valley that are saying, like, how can we help? And, I'm thinking of writing an article along the lines of send in the hoodies. In the past, We've sent in military forces, to try to fix things. We've sent in well-intentioned people who have, economic backgrounds, to help on policy and that, but really technologists who have a real skill set to help in this leapfrogging process that we're talking about. I mean, they have the skill set and they also have the motivations and the right intentions for doing the work. And so we're just trying to provide them the right outlet that can make best use of their time.
So as CEO of Alter that wants to make a difference, what have been your biggest challenges along the way and how did you actually overcome them?
Oh man, yeah, for sure. Like, I was also there at Stanford. Condoleezza Rice, it was a professor of mine who's, I just met with her a few weeks ago to share an update, on what she's kind of helped us create and what we're working towards. And she asked the question, where has been the hardest of the countries for you to work in? And honestly, it was really hard as I was weighing out in my mind from Afghanistan, where the physical security side and, we had a terrorist attack right in the buildings next to us where we're working with Roshan, the telecom there, and the head of Roshan is on our advisory board. And, when you have to deal with that level of insecurity and terrorist attacks every day, it's a really hard place to be in, and then the extreme poverty and the lack of a deep market in a place like Haiti is also really challenging. But Cuba, with the regulatory challenges, was my answer because there's not much you can do when there are government regulations in place, not just on the Cuban side, but on the U.S. side too, that says, hey, you can't be working with these entrepreneurs, in order to to really create the types of change that we want. And so for me, like if I try to step back and say, okay, what is the hardest thing that I've faced as the CEO of Alter and my original vision and intent of what we're trying to do? It would have to be this. And I wanted to head into the truly least developed countries in order to make an impact there. You know, the Haitis, the Afghanistans of the world, you know, even thinking Somalia, DRC. But the realization that I've had to come to is that high growth entrepreneurship requires an ecosystem. And you can't just have an exceptional entrepreneur without having these other factors in place, which are the right infrastructure, some of the market conditions, and people who have the ability and willingness to pay. You have to have the right government regulations in place in order to encourage entrepreneurship. And then probably a lack of extreme violence, and macroeconomic stability in some ways. And when I really thought about, okay, for me running a small organization that can be very targeted in the strategic way we were talking about, when all of these factors need to be fixed and solved, I had to say, okay, well, maybe we have to be in environments where we actually can get growth when we put in all these inputs of good support to the best entrepreneurs. They can't have a moat around them, at the country level. And so we had to look and say, like, which country should we be in next? Which country should we launch? And so for me, it was wrestling with my own internal self and my motivations for saying, I want to create the greatest amount of good. But I also don't want to be left with a lot of good intentions where we're not getting good results and outcomes. And what we found in Myanmar was they had a lot of these factors in place where they really are growing as a country economically. And when we put these inputs into these entrepreneurs and try to help work with them, they're really scaling. And you can actually derive financial return and profit from that. And so for us, trying to make a sustainable model so we don't just have to rely on the goodwill of donors, our whole existence, but we can really create a profit model, then it kind of moves you into countries that are a little bit further up the Human Development Index. And so, we're launching Bangladesh, we're looking at Nigeria and Kenya, but I also haven't lost the heart for the places that are least developed that really need the ecosystem to be developed as well. But it was that recognition of kind of the challenge that brings. So now we have a portfolio perspective. We're saying, how can we make financial investments in some of those countries like Nigeria or Kenya, Myanmar, Bangladesh, but how can we also work on the nonprofit side with those best-in-class entrepreneurs in countries like Afghanistan and Haiti and Somalia, maybe even Syria moving forward, so we can bring them into this community of the best-in-class entrepreneurs and the networks they need to, over time, move their countries in the right direction.
So what's next for Alter? I mean, is there anything else that you can share with us today about that vision or what your plans are for the future?
Yeah, so we, like you mentioned before, we were really fortunate to raise a round of funding here, of donor funding, to where we can really grow our team. And so what's up next is we have a really big year coming up. We have plans to launch 4 new countries where we're going to build out our pipeline of start working with those best-in-class entrepreneurs. And we do have Nigeria, Kenya, Bangladesh, Pakistan on that list. And so really excited to launch new countries and identify those best entrepreneurs and bring them in. We're also building out our partnerships in Silicon Valley. So I mentioned our relationship with McKinsey and some of the best consulting firm in the world, where you can really get great expertise directed towards our ventures. We're also looking at creating some relationships with technology companies like Facebooks and Googles of the world, because one of the core talent gaps that a lot of our companies face in these countries is access to great coding, software, technology talent. And so to do partnerships in Silicon Valley where we can offer our portfolio companies great support. And then building out our team. And so we're hiring a chief marketing officer and also a head of product and partnerships to really work with us. We're also hiring a chief investment officer to really help us raise this fund and do really good impact investing into these best-in-class companies that we're working with. So we got a really big year coming up. And really our long-term goal is to say, can we transform the developing world through high-growth entrepreneurship? Can we create a community of the best technology experts, entrepreneurs, and investors in the world that we can welcome those best-in-class developing world entrepreneurs into that community so they can create value in the parts of the world that need it most?
So if we do have anyone listening today that you've really inspired with your work and maybe want to get involved themselves, can you just remind them where they can find out more information or reach out to your team if they've got any question?
Yeah, definitely. Well, they can check out our website at alter.global, so ALTER.global. And, they can also reach out if it's on the recruiting side, it's recruiting@alter.global. Also, they can reach out with any questions that they might have. Even to me personally at Sully@alter.global. So SULLY @alter.global. And really happy to hear from you. And we'd love anyone we can involve in this community of folks that are mission driven and have the real technology skill set and want to offer it up. We'd love to talk to you.
Fantastic. You've raised so many great issues today about how I always say at the end of every show that technology works best when it brings people together. But you've highlighted how people are actually doing good with crypto rather than all those scary headlines that we see every day, and actually solving a real need and generating value to people with technology. And ultimately, creating a solution for the long term rather than the traditional approach of the short term. So I can only applaud you for that and really opening up my eyes, and I'm sure everyone listening today too. So a big thank you for coming on today, Jesse.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Neil, and thanks to everyone for listening.
I think there really is an inconvenient truth out there that most of the aid in developing countries is restricted to the traditional approaches. And let's be honest, they don't work. We've seen it for years. And they don't tackle the root cause of any problem because there's a lack of sustainable and scalable value creation. But by creating jobs, expanding Wi-Fi access to thousands of households and businesses, and helping the urban poor in developing countries actually get back up on their feet, that is inspirational, isn't it? I do love hearing and sharing stories on this podcast, and today's was a real highlight for me. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. If you want to get involved, let me know. I'll gladly pass on your details to Jesse too. But as always, you can email me at techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by the website techblogwriter.co.uk/podcast. And don't forget you can leave me an audio message there too. Speaking of audio messages, we're approaching 500 episodes, and I want to hear your voice talking about what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, even just a happy 500th podcast, Neil, wherever you listen in the world, because there are people in 163 different countries listening to this podcast, and I want to get your voice on here just to highlight in episode 500 how far we're sharing these stories and how we're collaborating and educating each other too. Hey, people say I'm a dreamer, but you know what? I'm not the only one. So that's it for today's episode. I'm going to be back tomorrow and every day this week. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.